go throughout the program. So again, thank you for joining us tonight for our listening session about the Capitol's ongoing research and digital humanities project, which we're currently calling From Naming to Knowing, Uncovering Slavery at the North Carolina State Capitol. We truly appreciate your interest and your time, again, especially on a Monday night. My name is Tara Schramm. I'm the site administrator here at the State Capitol, and joining me tonight are my colleagues, Natalie Rodriguez, who's the Capitol's volunteer and tour coordinator, and Kara Dedman, who's the Capitol's curator. So together, the three of us make up the primary research team for this project. And tonight we have some special technical assistance by our other colleague, Bobby Carmody, who's helping us run Zoom over here. So we're very grateful for his assistance. So before we get into the work of the program tonight, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that we will be discussing the forced labor and oppression of human beings, which may bring an emotional response or feel painful to engage with. And so I think it's important for us to clear our minds of the day, previous brain activity, and kind of mentally and emotionally prepare ourselves for the discussion. And so if you feel comfortable, I'd like to invite you to join me in a short grounding exercise. So sometimes we find that it's helpful to go ahead and close your eyes and take several deep breaths from your belly. And as you're breathing, pay attention to parts of your body and bodily sensations from feet to head, bringing awareness to each part. Notice aches, pains, tensions, tingles, and notice these without judgment. So once you have scanned each part of your body, go ahead and bring yourself back to this space. Maybe take one more deep breath and open your eyes. So hopefully you're feeling grounded, and we are going to center ourselves with a spoken word reflection that was written and performed previously by a former intern and a now dear friend of ours, Nick Corman. Nick is a graduate student at North Carolina Central University studying African American history. And the piece you're about to see, he wrote and performed specifically about the Capitol and the ongoing work to broaden the narrative, the historical narrative.
We can never rectify present-day wrongs if we never reckon with past evils. For too long, we've compromised promises of equity with the false notion that this country has seen us as equal. I heard one thing in the Declaration of Independence, but I'm still waiting on the Founding Fathers to drop the sequel. But in the task of uncovering the Capitol's roots, I must ask, what is the people's house without the narratives of the people? But more specifically, the narratives of those who had to work against their will. I'm speaking of the enslaved people who were never treated properly since they were only seen as property. I'm also speaking of those who were free and black, those who labored tirelessly on the construction of this building but still had to enter through the back. So what is the people's house without the people? A standing contradiction, an architectural embodiment of a hypocritical country's poisoned vision, a painful reminder of a well-articulated prediction that this country never believed in. And as I think of this beautiful building and the many momentous occasions that have occurred, I can't help but hear the whispers from ancestors who spent an entire lifetime without being heard. I can't help but think about the black bodies that sacrificed only to never get the credit that they deserved. I think about how the seats we've been occupying this morning were full of men who never cared. Every time I look at the Capitol, I think of the West Stairs and how black laborers had to use them to transport firewood to keep this building heated. And when I take the same staircase, I embrace each chip and blemish that they left behind, as if they knew that with the passage of time, their names would never be remembered since they were meant to be left behind. I think of those blemishes as their signatures, while the stairs are the dotted line, almost as if they made them to remind us that they were here too. And this is the power of broadening the narrative. It's imperative for us to bring honor and light to these names because they were more than their situations and the chains they were forced to wear. The grounds and the walls, these grounds and these walls hold so many stories we need to share, and the time is now for us to care. And each of us in this room has a responsibility to use our positions, privileges, and God-given abilities to provide visibility to people who were forced to the shadows. So if we want the words of our many hallowed documents to ring true, then we all need to roll up our sleeves because we have more work to do. Thank y'all so much.
So Nick does great work, and unfortunately he could not be with us today. He's a poet of some renown and travels widely. I wanted to take a moment to show a photograph of the West Stairs here at the Capitol. If you haven't been or you're not familiar with that story, as Nick referenced in his poem, this is where enslaved men would have carried wheelbarrows full of wood up the stairs to feed the fireplaces during the legislative sessions. And it's one of the few places in the building where you can actually kind of see a physical reminder of their labor. So it's a powerful part of our story for sure. So before we get into the meat of our program today, I wanted to go over a couple of rules for engagement. So I think we've got those up there, as you can see. They're simple rules that we just ask everyone to adhere to as we go through the program tonight. Number one, we are always learning and we commit to learning more together. We will listen to our fellow participants with respect, and we will bring our authentic selves to this session, speaking from our personal experiences and sharing our unique perspectives. So thank you for keeping those in mind as we go through our program tonight. And so this is the last of 3 public listening sessions that we are holding. And the purpose of these sessions is for us to gather feedback on this research and digital humanities project, which is still in a raw state before we officially debut the website. So we are reimagining the way in which we tell the Capitol's story. We want to share our work and give you and the community a window into the kind of narratives that we are building while we're in the process of constructing this project. And so we are asking for your honest critique and feedback. So we anticipate that this website will go live in early 2023. And one of our central goals for this website is for it to be responsive and of service to the community. So I'm going to provide a little bit of background on the project, and then Natalie and Kara will take us through the website and the research. So please feel free again to ask us questions. If things don't make sense or you need clarity on anything, please drop that in the chat or unmute yourself and ask that question. At the end of our presentation, we will have some guiding questions to help us get started in our conversation, but we are by no means limited to just those guiding questions. So again, this project seeks first and foremost to name the enslaved African Americans who built and maintained the North Carolina State Capitol between 1831 and 1865, and to acknowledge their contributions and humanity. So for many, many years, there was little to no mention of slavery or the enslaved people involved in the building's construction in the interpretation of this space. And in recent years, probably over the last 15 years or so, the building's interpretation evolved to include enslaved people, but with very broad and general information, using statements such as, well, we know enslaved labor was used, we don't know how. We don't know how many people worked here, those kind of broad statements. But beginning in 2019, and really since the onset of the pandemic, our staff has made great strides in researching this previously ignored aspect of the Capitol's history. So our research team has been researching, documenting, and building narratives for individuals. And we can now name over 130 enslaved men, most of whom who worked here during the building's construction. Pretty early on, our team decided that a website would be the most effective way to present and share this research. Of course, as you know, a website can grow and evolve in real time as we continue to carry out research and identify more sources and individuals who are connected to this space. fully acknowledge that a website of this nature is not an original idea by any means. There are a lot of really great websites out there in the field, similar ones like the Montpelier Naming Project, the White House Historical Association comes to mind. So we certainly are standing on the shoulders of folks who have kind of blazed a trail before us. But I will say, to our knowledge, there is no other capital that has embarked on a project of this scale to reveal the individual stories of enslaved workers. So with that said, I'm gonna pivot and ask Natalie to lead us through the website as it currently appears.
All right, I hope everyone can see my screen. It is the homepage of our website, as Tara mentioned. Once again, my name is Natalie Rodriguez. Thank you all for joining us today. I apologize for my eyes darting back and forth. I have two monitors, so I am looking at our screen, and I will be the website and explaining the logistics of our website and more of the kind of mapping the website as I talk of what is located in different places of our website. Then following that, just to let y'all know that Kara will follow and kind of explain more in depth the historical research and methodologies we took in building this website. So I wanted to kind of preface that before I got into this website page, because this is not the only time we'll be talking about the website and how it is functioned. So as you all should see, we are currently on the homepage of the website, From Naming to Knowing, Uncovering Slavery at the North Carolina State Capitol. This is what all visitors will be greeted with virtually when they enter our website. As many of you probably already know, or maybe even see, that this website was done through a website builder called Squarespace. So this is not a website that is in part of our state historic site website. This is a website that is on a different domain. And so with that, I would like to share that we've done listening sessions in the past, so we've had feedback on our website, not just kind of the formatting and things, but also accessibility. So I want to keep that in mind for you all too, because since this is a virtual platform, we do have to address our audiences in a variety of different ways. And also provide information that contextualizes some of the things we're talking about on our website. But as I stated before, this is our homepage, and I'm just going to be using my mouse to point through things along the way. So this is our main page. We have a variety of different tabs in order, and they're also hyperlinked on our main page, and I'll explain a little bit more of that. But history is the first drop-down menu that visitors are able to click on. It has a variety of different essays that contextualize a lot of the topics we're talking about regarding the enslavement of people, in North Carolina, because, as Tara mentioned, we are hitting on some heavy topics, some regarding the enslavement of people, sexual violence. We wanted to provide essays that provided some those topics, how they related to us, our site, but also in a larger frame of what that history looked like in a larger kind of like overview in a sense. So those essays are here. They're also hyperlinked throughout the website, and I'll get into that later. So the next one we have is story. So a big part of this project is us going from naming the enslaved laborers who built the Capitol to knowing more about these people and sharing their stories. Now, we truly cannot know these men's life and their experiences other than what we've been able to research. We haven't had a conversation with these people or anything like that, but we do want to share their stories. So though we have over 100 names of laborers, our team as researchers have been able to provide narratives and short essays to a variety of different individuals that we have been able to find information on. So again, Kara will explain these narratives and show you all kind of what resources we use with those narratives. But this is a drop-down menu that can give readers or visitors a direct link right to the essays. This next tab is resources. It's going to be a resource page. So as we spoke on earlier, this is a research project, and we have utilized a lot of resources, primary source, secondary source materials to research these people, to write these stories and these essays. So we want to be as transparent as possible. This is where we're getting our information from. We have, if we can, we hyperlink it to digital resources and archives we've been able to utilize. Carolina's been a big resource for us. The state archives has been a huge resource for us. So we wanted people to not only know about this history and this interpretation of what we're talking about, but also to know this is where we're getting this information from. And this is how we compiled it. This next, it's not going to be a drop-down menu of sorts, but the next option is frequently asked questions. We do realize this is something we added recently to our website. So I'm just going to click on this real quick. But as you can see on this page, it starts with frequently asked questions. And so we address some things we've gotten frequently asked to us, and we thought it'd be a good idea to put this on a page. So what started this project? We have a blurb about that. How many enslaved people have you identified? We have a blurb about that. And what sources do you use? And anytime we're able to answer a question, if we're able to hyperlink it to another resource on the page, we have done that. So how many enslaved people have you identified? As of October 2020, we have identified 136 enslaved men who constructed the Capitol. To see their names, you can visit, and it's on our homepage. So I'm gonna go back to our homepage, and it brings you back here. Now, I'll get back into the names and where they're presented, but I just want to kind of finish up with our drop-down menus. We do have About Us, which provides information about the Capitol in regards to it being a state historic site. Also, that is part of the, it is a part of the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources for the state of North Carolina. So we are a state entity. We are very transparent about that. We also have links to our web. Each one of us have a bio on this page. So it presents us as beautiful ladies and who we are and how we contributed to the project. So, and finally, we have a contact page. And that is also at the end of this homepage. But if anyone has any information that they can provide to us or want to help us identify some great research materials and a variety of things, they can contact us. And finally, we have our social media handles here. So we have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And if anything in regards to our website or just any programs come up, you can check those out on our website. So now that I've gotten through that, I will briefly kind of scroll through our homepage. Now, everything on our homepage is kind of in order to how our hyperlinks are above. So the first section of the website addresses why we're doing this work. And again, we are a part of state historic sites, and a little bit of background about the Capitol and its construction project. And then we scroll down to, these are names of men laborers who have built or sustained the Capitol building. So if all those names I mentioned before, this is what I was referring to. This is the gentlemen that we have been able to identify based off a historical document, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And if they have a narrative or story addressed, like in the stories we saw above on that top page, you can hyperlink, you can click on a hyperlink and go to the story. Now, this is a list of all the names. So if we keep on scrolling down, we'll go to selected individual names. And I'm sorry, I'm going to skip real quick this section. I'll go back to it. But this is the individual narratives we have been able to complete in a sense. I don't like saying complete because we can still add things to these people's narratives later on. But these are essays that we've gotten a large chunk of information on and been able to write some type of narrative to these stories. Now, I'm sorry, I did skip a section above that, but Kara's going to go into this commissioner's report a little later on, but just to kind of add, this is on our homepage as well. This report started pretty much our whole project. These list of names on this historical document was where we started off with really trying to identify who these people were and what kind of work they did. So that is in between the majority list of all the names and then the list of, the narrative stories below it. And if anyone would like to see this document, they can go to the State Archives website because it is a state document, and we've hyperlinked that as well below it, right here. All right. So again, like I said, the individual stories and narratives are here. Their names that have been listed on the documents we found. A brief little summary below. And then we keep on going down. And if someone was just going through our homepage, they would kind of come across each one of these things, but it's in an order in a sense where we're hoping that by the time that someone scrolls down all the way to the bottom of our page, whether they reviewed our essay section on top, they can still have a chance to read our essays at the bottom that contextualizes the stories of these men. So we have slavery in North Carolina and how that a little history background about the enslavement of people here in North Carolina. We also have an essay in the uses of slavery in construction projects. As some of you may not know, the slave labor was used in a variety of public and private construction projects through the US. So one big example of this, I think Tara mentioned, is the US Capitol, but there's other examples that are very relevant. And I mean, even to the point where we have a church located near our site and they were built by enslaved people. So we just want to provide some context that this wasn't a standalone type project, that this did happen other places, and we provided context for that as well. And then the Capitol's construction project, we are not I would say unique in a sense, not even just a time frame or construction project, but being able to really identify who worked on this project by names. But we provide some context about the Capitol's construction project as well. Finally, you're at the end of our homepage. Thank y'all. Thank you for bearing all that. But you get a contact page. So if a person, a visitor, has gone through that one homepage alone, they've gotten a lot of information, or maybe they come back, they can click on our contact tab all the way at the top, or visitors can come down to this base of the homepage and type in any inquiries or suggestions or questions they may have for our site. And that will populate to us as a team, and we can address any questions that people may have. It has our site's phone number here, as well as our address. That is not our mailing address, just to put out there, so don't mail anything to that address. But and then we also have our state email address. So these, as well as our social media feeds, and we have our historic sites emblem image, as well as our department's emblem here. So that is the website thus far. I'm gonna scroll, all the way back to the top so y'all can see. Again, the website's From Naming to Knowing, Uncovering Slavery at the North Carolina State Capitol. And if anyone was to click on another, let's just say I'm gonna go to another page, they would always have to click on From Naming to Knowing to get back to our homepage. So I'm just under one of our narratives right now. If someone went through here, they could click, right back on From Naming to Knowing, and it'll take them back to the homepage right here. All right, with that, I am going to pass along my time to Kara so she can explain a little bit more about research methods and some of our essays as well.
All right, thank you, Natalie. Hello, everyone. I'm Kara Dedman. I'm the museum curator here at the State Capitol. And I wanted to speak to you all a little bit about our research and methodology for this project. And again, this project is the research and study of the known enslaved men. So currently we know of 136 individuals, most of whom worked here at the Capitol during the building's construction, so throughout the 1830s. The cornerstone for the Capitol was laid in 1833, and construction was completed and the building opened in June of 1840. And as Natalie was saying, we wanted to be really transparent about our research and our methodology with this project, both here with you on these listening sessions and on the website as well. We want people to be able to access and use our research and expand upon their own work. So that's really kind of a dream of ours with this website, is to be able to aid researchers in doing their own work. So as much as possible on the website, you will find sources with each narrative. So each story of each individual that Natalie mentioned, you will find a source list within those stories. You will see links to documents and sources if they are digitally available. And again, we want to be really clear and transparent about how we are piecing together this information. So I will actually take you now to our resources tab. So this section here talks about any digitally available repositories that we've used in this work so far. Obviously, we use the State Archives of North Carolina a great deal. That entity is actually a part of our department as well. But we're very fortunate that here at the Capitol, we're right in the middle of downtown Raleigh. The State Archives is actually like diagonally across the street from us. So we're able to actually visit and access the archives physically. But we understand that not everyone can do that. And we want to provide any digitally available materials here in the resources section. So we link to things that we've used in the State Archives. We also use a great deal from the Digital Library on American Slavery. And actually, we were able to locate several individuals who built and maintained the Capitol in runaway slave ads that are housed digitally on the Digital Library for American Slavery. So that they are linked here as well. We also have sources from UNC, so the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. They run a digital repository called Doc South, which is fantastic. If you as a researcher, I highly recommend going to Doc South at some point. But actually, two individuals who we know worked at the Capitol after construction were Friday Jones and Lunsford Lane. And both of those individuals, their narratives are available in full on Doc South. Recently, we've used the Freedmen's Papers, which are available digitally from the Smithsonian, and that collection is always changing and evolving as more and more of the Freedmen's Papers are digitized. So we wanted to link those as well. So going back to the homepage, Natalie mentioned this, but much of our research actually started with this document. So this is the report of the commissioners appointed to superintend the rebuilding of the state capitol. And it was published by the commissioners of the project in 1834. So during the first portion of the building's construction. And what was happening here was the commissioners were basically justifying what they were doing. They were publishing this report like to the assembly, basically saying, here's everybody who was employed at the Capitol project at this moment in time. And when we saw this document, actually when we located it in December of 2019, this was the first time that we had seen many of these names, right? So this document gives us the first and surname of many individuals who were working here during construction. And if you can tell, it also lists who is an enslaved person working on the project. So it says their name and then the word slave. And again, this was the first time that we had seen so many of these names. Besides giving their first and last name, it also specifies what type of work they were doing during the construction. So it lists them either as general laborers or as quarrymen. So if you've never visited the Capitol before, the Capitol is a big stone building. It is actually made from locally quarried stone. So the state of North Carolina owned and operated a rock quarry near downtown Raleigh. And so the stone was quarried from that site and then carted to the Capitol, to this site for construction. So enslaved people were either working at the state quarry, doing the heavy backbreaking work of quarrying stone, or they were working here at the construction site as general laborers. We still don't know exactly what that term laborers could have meant. We think that probably it was that they were engaging in some sort of labor that was considered like less skilled. I'm air quoting skilled because most, if not all, construction labor is skilled labor. But this would have been, things like general construction labor, carpentry, general plaster work, brick making, the work of general construction. This document also shows us how much each person's labor was valued per day. So on average, an enslaved person was generating about 50 cents per day at this project. And of course, we know that enslaved people were not able to keep the wages that they were earning. Any compensation that they were generating was going to their enslavers because their labor was being rented to the Capitol's construction project. But it was because the document showed us the first and last names of the workers that it was the most valuable starting point for our research. And from this list, from the quarrymen list and the laborers list, we suddenly had about 90 names, of full names of individuals. And using these names, we began connecting to other people that we knew in Raleigh, so other members of the community, people who lived and worked here. We started just building this network of people that were involved in the Capitol's construction. So I'll take you over here to our spreadsheet. So as we began gathering information, we started this internal spreadsheet. So forgive us, this is an internal document. If you see typos and that sort of thing, it's because it's something that the three of us work from frequently. And we all begin collectively editing, placing names here. So the categories that we've identified here in this internal document are first and last name of an enslaved person. And then we list any biographical information that we might know about that person. So in a lot of cases, this is merely the word quarryman or laborer, right? That's all we've been able to gather about them thus far. And then we also list enslaver. So if an enslaver's name over here is in bold, that actually means that we've proven the connection between enslaver and enslaved person through verifying with some other resource. So you can see many of these, they have bold letters. That means, again, we've proven that connection. We also list the date of known employment at the Capitol. So many of these individuals, the only dates that we know of are the 1834 date from the commissioner's report. But if we're able to verify that they were working here in other years, we list that as well. Then if we have any information about the wages that they were generating, we put the wage in dollars. And then the very last category over there to the far right is sources. So this is where we're dumping any, online sources, any place that we're getting material for these individuals. So Tara, Natalie, and myself each took a section of names. So initially we were each working with about 30 individuals, and we began diving in. So we were trying to locate each enslaved person in every known resource. So anything that we knew about. To tell these stories, we went deep into the state archives and looked through any related materials that the archives held. We looked at census records, runaway slave ad databases, property deeds, newspapers, wills and probate records, any other digitized repository that we could think of. As we began doing a lot of this research during COVID when many in-person archives were shut down. we reached out to colleagues across the field. So if you're a colleague that has seen this internal spreadsheet at some point, we've sent it to you. Thank you so much. We just were asking people who also do this work or are familiar with this type of work, if they're familiar with any known name, whether that be a full name or a surname of any individual that we had located here. And again, this research really shows the complicated network of individuals involved in the Capitol's construction, right? So enslaved people were here, hired out by their enslavers, who were often local landowners. Sometimes they were local or state elected officials, or they were appointed to positions of power within state government. And it's often easier to find information about those enslavers. Their position of extreme privilege and power meant that their papers were kept and held by family or community repositories, or even held by the State Archives of North Carolina. So as we gathered information, as we started completing the categories in this internal spreadsheet, we began writing individual biographies. And we were able to find a great deal of information about a dozen or so individuals. And again, those are the stories listed here on the website. So they're here in the drop-down menu. They're also hyperlinked elsewhere in the website. It's our dream, our strongest dream, to be able to create stories or narratives for each individual that we name. But I will go more into that in a moment. But I did want to walk you through one individual story and kind of how we pieced together this story. So this is Junius Brickell's story or narrative. And we start with the phrase, what we know about Junius Brickell. We do this with each individual story because even though we've been able to gather a lot of information about Junius, there's still so much about him that we don't know. And so we begin with the phrase, what we know, and not just like Junius's story or something like that. So Junius was listed in the 1834 Commissioner's Report as a laborer. And you can see his name here, says next to the red arrow, it says Junius Brickell, slave. And he was generating about 50 cents per day. Again, that was about the average for enslaved people working on the project. In the first paragraph here about Junius, we also list his wife, Delia Leach. So though we don't know much about her, we like to, if there are women that are a part of the story of these individuals, we like to mention them early in the story, even though, Junius and Delia maybe knew each other way later. And we did that because one of the questions that we get asked most frequently about this project is, where are women? Why aren't you talking about more women? And we fully acknowledge that there were probably women working here or engaged in the work in some capacity. We just haven't located those stories yet. So anyways, we wanted to mention women when women's stories intersect here. So moving down through Junius's story, we talk about his enslaver. And so we're not sure if Junius was able to pocket any of the 50 cents per day that his labor generated, but we do know that he was able to pick up his own compensation. And the reason that we know that is because his enslaver, Martha Brickell, actually wrote a series of notes that she sent to the commissioners or the architects working on the project, asking that Junius be able to pick up his own compensation. So you can see here's one example. These are all in the state archives. They're actually in the comptroller's records, which are with the treasurer's records. And they relate to capital construction records. And this first one says, Mr. West will please pay to Junius his hire for this month. And it's dated 1837 in Brickell. So again, this is showing that Martha Brickell is asking that Junius be given his wages. Probably he's just taking them back to Martha and she's pocketing them as she, again, is his enslaver, renting his labor to this project. But you can see there are several instances where Martha's writing these types of notes. And we tell this part of the story is related to Martha because of this. So this actually is a mark that Junius Brickell made in what are called the time books. So these time books are ledgers that list every person that was engaged in the Capitol's construction. So they break it down by type of labor. So this is the general laborer's time book, and it shows each week that construction continued, who worked here that week, how many days they worked, how much they were compensated. And importantly, in our efforts, it lists both their name and whoever was picking up their compensation. So whoever was signing for the wages, in the case of enslaved people, enslavers were signing as they picked up the wages of their enslaved person. But we know that Junius, Martha actually asked that Junius be able to pick up his own compensation, right? So here in the time book, it says, under this red arrow, it says Junius Brickell. And in the center, it has a little X and it says his mark. So we believe that this was a mark that Junius was able to put upon the page, showing that he was picking up his own compensation. This was important to us when we found it because, of course, this was during the 1830s when it was illegal for enslaved people to be able to read and write. So again, here's Junius being able to make a mark upon the page. We also used maps a lot in this project. It was really important to us to be able to visualize and kind of build this community story utilizing maps, historic maps. So two maps in particular we use very frequently. The first one was from 1834. And this map actually shows the central grid of downtown Raleigh, and it also shows property owners on the lots. So Martha Brickell actually owned 2 lots, several blocks from the Capitol, but just northwest from the Capitol's construction site. And it's very likely that Junius, as well as Martha's other enslaved people, lived on that property and walked here to the Capitol's construction site. We also used an 1847 map that actually shows structures. So here you can see M. Brickell and the 2 structures that were built upon that property that she owned. Then if we have any information, relevant information about the enslaver, we tell that information. We're not sure what happened to Junius in a period between the Capitol's construction and 1850. So actually Martha Brickell is listed in the federal census slave schedule from 1850. So you can see here, it says Martha Brickell and it lists the people that she enslaved. Enslaved people were not named in the federal census slave schedules. They were only enumerated and it listed by their enslaver and then generally age and male or female, and then racial identification. So none of these ages really match up with what we know about Junius. So we don't think that Martha was his enslaver by this point in his life. And she actually died in 1852, and Junius was not mentioned in her will. However, we do find Junius a bit later in the Raleigh Register's call for letters in 1855. And then after emancipation, we actually found Junius in local marriage records. So his marriage could have been earlier, but this would have been the first time that the marriages of emancipated people or formerly enslaved people were being recognized formally. And so we're not sure, again, when he and Delia actually got married, but here is this marriage record from 1878 showing that he's marrying Delia Leach. Then, as I said earlier, each story contains the references. So as much as possible, we are linking if they are available, here, click through to see the map, that sort of thing. But yeah, this is an example of a more complete narrative that we've had. Going back over to the spreadsheet, I wanted just to briefly share, there's many examples of this that you can see, but again, just briefly share an example of someone that we haven't been able to locate much information about. So that would be Nathan Stewart. You see his name here in the spreadsheet. The only biographical information that we know about Nathan is that he was a laborer, and he is listed in that 1834 Commissioner's Report as laborer. Then for enslaver, you can see we said maybe Jonathan Stewart, ? And Jonathan Stewart was listed in 1830 as an absentee owner, enslaver in Wake County. But we haven't proved that connection in any capacity. So you can see that we're kind of guessing at his enslaver based upon a surname, a familiar surname, and someone, appearing elsewhere in historic records. So thus far, we haven't been able to really locate enough information to tell a fuller story of Nathan Stewart. So I'm actually going to stop sharing, and Tara is going to talk to us just a little bit about the future of this project before we open it up for discussion.
Okay, thank you so much, Kara and Natalie, for all that really good information. And as Kara said, I will just briefly mention kind of the ways that we're hoping to use this research to tell the Capitol story. So I think, as I mentioned, this is the third public listening session that we're hosting before the website goes live. And again, we anticipate that will be in early 2023. So immediately our team plans to huddle and incorporate all the wonderful feedback that we've been hearing from folks. And you'll get a link to the website so you can poke around it yourself. And we would love for you to send us feedback, or if there are other things that you think of after tonight, feel free to email us. We would appreciate that. But I also wanted to share a glimpse into some of the ways that we're already using this research and these stories. Two of the, I think, most impactful ways that we have already started sharing these stories were through a couple of programs. First is our Juneteenth program, and that's what you see the chalk drawings there on the grounds. For Juneteenth in 2021, that was the first federally recognized Juneteenth, but the state capitol was not yet open, still due to COVID concerns. And so we were trying to think of what we could do to mark that holiday while following all the rules. And so what we decided to do is hire some chalk artists who came and drew the outlines of portraits of people who were had connections to the state capitol, African Americans who were connected in some way. So either enslaved in the building or served in the legislature. And then we invited the community to come and help color in those portraits, or they could choose a name. So we had the names, many of the names that are on our list of enslaved laborers. They could choose a name to honor and write that name on the sidewalk that surrounds the state capitol. And so by the end of the day, there's this beautiful community art project with dozens of names with really artistic flair, and it was really powerful. So that was one thing. The next Juneteenth, the Capitol was open happily, and so we looked for some ways to celebrate stories of freedom, and we chose some individuals who we knew survived through to see emancipation. So people like Junius, and we crafted a special tour where we talked about what we knew about their life after emancipation and how they impacted their communities and what their lives looked like from what we could, what our research told us. So we look forward really to incorporating more stories in more organic ways through our interpretation exhibits, just making them an important and commonplace part of our story here at the Capitol, especially because those stories for so long were not shared. We also are hopeful that the website will really help us connect with different communities. Obviously, we would love to make connections with descendants, researchers, students, genealogists, all sorts of different people. We hope that this will serve our community and that create, stronger connections between our site and the people that we serve. So that is kind of our overview. I think we're going to pivot now to our guiding questions. And as I mentioned, these are just some broad questions that we developed. We'd love for you to think about what you'd like to see us expand upon with this project. If you have suggestions for other people, groups, resources, other things that could aid us in this work, that would be wonderful. And we also would love to hear your feedback about the name of the project. Are there words or phrases that come to mind as we're discussing it? We have really wrestled with the name of this project, from naming to knowing. On the one hand, we feel like by naming the individuals, we are telling people that we know they were here. On the flip side of that, we acknowledge that we can't really know a lot about these individuals because all the sources that we are mining are certainly privileged to the enslavers, and none of these documents, at least so far, very few of them were written from the enslaved person's perspective. And so is it okay to say that you know them? Well, no, maybe not. So anyway, that's just a little insight into some of the questions that we've been wrestling with. We are going to pull up a Jamboard here that our colleague Bobby is going to populate. So you can think about those questions, but if there are other ones that come to mind, feel free. So you can do the chat or feel free to unmute yourself and ask away. Everyone thinks it's perfect. We're done.
David, did you have a question?
Yeah. So, yeah, lower here. This is lovely. It's amazing. I especially love the part about the name, the building. You get tired of hearing George Washington built Mount Vernon because he didn't. Just like Thomas Jefferson did not build Monticello. My thought is carrying this on. Is there any thought about a future expansion in terms of African Americans during Reconstruction and the Jim Crow era, and their either employment as representatives in the legislative body or employment in the building? I know what word I'm looking for and it's not there. The continuation of the work, because keeping the loos clean, things like that. Is there any thought about carrying on the yeoman's job that you've done? This is really choice, by the way. It's very nice. You get lots of props.
I can start answering that. Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely correct that this isn't a story that ended with emancipation. We do tell the stories of especially the first Black legislators to serve in the General Assembly. So there were over 100 that served in both the House and the Senate from 1868 until they were eventually basically banned effectively from voting and holding public office with the institution of Jim Crow. So yeah, absolutely. We could see expanding this project in so many different ways and linking it to so many narratives that we already tell, narratives that we've yet to tell in this space. I think with this project, our first step was to acknowledge the work and the humanity of enslaved people whose whose personhood, whose work had been denied here for so long. Like Tara mentioned initially, we made these really, even when we were interpreting slavery here, we made these really broad blanket statements saying things like, well, we know enslaved people were here, but we don't know what they were doing, and those types of things. And prior to that, there was no mention of enslaved people at all. So I guess we wanted to start there first, like by really acknowledging this group of individuals, and again, their humanity, their personhood, their contribution to this building and to the state. But you're absolutely right that these stories can be carried forward past emancipation as much as possible. We try to acknowledge if we know anything about an individual after emancipation, that is included in their narrative. But there are so many other places, Reconstruction and beyond, places where we could take this research and this work. Tara and Nat, did you want to say anything to that? I think there was another hand. Was it
This is Daphne, maybe.
Daphne? Yeah.
Yes, good evening, all. Yes, this has just been so enlightening and so interesting. One of the personal interests that I have, or the ties that I am looking for, I am a member of St. Paul AME Church. And because of our church, I know that there has to be some ties between what was built at the Capitol, because we are so close. So I didn't know if there was any thought of the project looking in that direction. Also, we have the Downtown Church Coalition, that there are other churches that make that up in the downtown Raleigh area. Now, all of them may not be predominantly African American, but still there may be some slave labor involved in the building of those edifices as well. And so I think that would be a wonderful perspective to pursue, what other entities in a certain radius also had the support of slave labor, and how that affects this project as well.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Daphne. We would love to connect with you. Of course, we know there are a lot of connections between St. Paul and the Capitol, and some of the individuals that we have researched. Certainly Stuart Ellison comes to mind as a legislator representing Wake County and building St. Paul. So yeah, amazing. And Kara has done some really good work with Christ Church already. I know that they are exploring, in the early stages of exploring the enslaved community as it intersects with their church. And but that's one thing that we have talked a lot about, actually, is that, you know, we're right in the center, and there are 4 churches that are right around the Capitol. So yes, absolutely, we think that's an important connection.
And our membership was actually started from Eatonton Street United Methodist Church. So there may even be some ties there as well, because that is where our membership started there, and then radiated down the street upon them gifting us the land to build St. Paul.
Yeah,
It's all
absolutely.
connected, isn't it?
I
Yeah.
just want to add, oh, sorry, Kara, go ahead.
Oh, no, you can go, Natalie. Yeah.
I was just going to add one thing we are finding with this research project, and also I would confidently say other research projects that involve African Americans in the community of Raleigh, or even in the state. The church is a very big center, and to, as you say, I'm trying the best way, organizing and improving communities. And so one thing I think for myself that's been pretty rewarding is learning how these churches are connected, especially the African-American churches here in Raleigh, and the history of them. We also have a lot of historically Black colleges here in Raleigh, or just in the state of North Carolina as well. So one of our previous listening sessions, one of our visitors attendees mentioned, what about, the historically Black colleges and universities and how they tie into this community narrative that you're talking about. So one thing that we found with our Juneteenth program this past year, and talking about these people, these men beyond enslavement is how they became community members that contributed to their community. They were maybe running for office, or they were taking part in leaders in their churches. So that's definitely something that has been in our radar, the topic of African-American churches connected to this project.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Absolutely. Cecilia, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. This is fascinating. Are you going to have some mechanism for people who might come across some of these names in other research projects and find information about them? Are you going to have some mechanism then for them to be able to contribute to this or add to it?
Yeah, that would be fantastic. So we've kind of started doing that already. We've actually been able to connect with a descendant who was actually descended from a man named Pompey Hunter, who worked on the Capitol's construction. And the descendant who gathers their own researches family genealogy extensively, was able to provide us with some more information about Pompey. So our goal there is, if that person is comfortable with putting that into a narrative, working with us to synthesize a larger narrative of that person, we would love to include that type of work. Yeah, we absolutely would love to hear from people doing their own research. We're a state agency, so anything that we put out to the public, it's publicly accessible, it's fair game for researchers. So we would love for people to take our research and incorporate it into their projects. Right now, the mechanism that we have for gathering that information is just the contact us form. Filling out that form links directly back to myself, Tara, and Natalie. We will go through all of those responses and, reach out to the people when appropriate. Yeah, absolutely. We would love, and again, we want this website to be as nimble and as responsive to the community as possible. So if someone comes to us and they say, I was reading this narrative and I know things about this person, and I don't think that you have the right information here, we definitely want to be responsive in that circumstance as well. So that was one of the primary reasons that we chose to do a website, was so that we could update information continuously. I want to add to that. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I saw that Catherine had a question in the chat, in this asking about, is there any evidence of enslaved men working as skilled artisans? And Catherine, it's funny that you brought that up. I was at the Preservation North Carolina symposium in Wilmington last weekend, where they were talking a lot about Black artisans. And I thought, why haven't we found more about the skilled artisans? We know that the plaster workers and stone cutters plaster workers came from Philadelphia, and stone workers came from Scotland. But surely there were locally enslaved people, and we haven't found anything really besides Handy Lockhart, who was made furniture. He made some of the legislative furniture. He was enslaved by William Thompson, who was credited with making the furniture. But beyond him, so far, we haven't. And it's been rolling around my brain this whole last couple of weeks of Shirley. So yeah, stay tuned, I guess.
And Tara, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, even with his description of his labor, it was never like literally skilled artisan. It would say he did woodwork, of some coffin making. Am I wrong? Like, it was not that in depth describing his type of skill sets, other than, of course, the research that we've been able to uncover. So I would think, in some sense, sometimes it's not always identified as a skilled labor. And I just kind of want to add that too.
Yeah, that would be my response as well, Catherine, is that I think that there were circumstances where people, enslaved people were working here and they had highly valued skills, even though that's not noted in like the commissioner's report or anything like that. And I'm basing that assumption on the fact that the average compensation of wages per day was 50 cents, and there were a couple individuals who made significantly more than that. So I'm thinking of a man named Glasgow Saunders, who was compensated $1.25 per day. And I believe Ned Peck made significantly more than 50 cents per day as well, but I can't remember if he made like 125 or 150 per day. And again, they might have been acting in like a supervisory capacity, or they might have had a more highly valued skill. With the case of Glasgow, he was working here and he was one of the more highly compensated enslaved people, but listed directly underneath him on the commissioner's report were Peter and Washington Saunders, who were compensated only 15 cents and 20 cents per day. So my assumption, my feeling with these names has always been that Glasgow had some more highly valued skill for the project, and he was bringing Peter and Washington, who might have been related to him, or who might have been children or much younger, and was bringing them to assist in what he was doing. But again, they were not generating that much money, very far below the average. So like Tara said, we've never found like proof where it denotes like that this individual was a master carpenter or a master plaster worker or something. But based on how they were being valued, how their labor was being valued, I think some individuals had more highly valued skills. Yeah.
We do have some questions in the chat as well. Let me see. So Daphne, I see you asked also the ties to Oberlin Village community. Any thoughts? We got this at our last listening session. Yes, we have, and Tara, I'll let you kind of talk about our Oberlin connection.
Sure. I don't have a ton on it yet, but I suspect there are more connections. Again, Andy Lockhart is somebody who is someone that we should have known about from the beginning, because he left just an incredible amount in the historical record. And he was a landowner in Oberlin. We also know of a man named Jerry Hinton, who's buried in the cemetery at Oberlin. He was enslaved by Charles Lewis Hinton, who was the first treasurer when the building opened. And there's a story that he brought his enslaved man, Jerry, to work with him. And Jerry was the first person to light a fire in the fireplace at the state capitol. And Jerry lived to be 101 years old. It was amazing. So those are just two that I can think of off the top of my head, but the Oberlin story is incredible, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to unearth some more connections and work with the Friends of Oberlin Village at some point to share those connections.
And then our other question is from Lynn, and it states, I saw you had looked at Ancestry.com for information, but wondering if you've spoken to folks at the North Carolina Genealogical Society or Wake County Genealogical Society may have more good resources. And I can speak to that personally. I did meet with some of individuals from both organizations at a recent Juneteenth festival here in Raleigh this past year. So I spoke with them. This is before we began our listening sessions, and they were very excited about the work we were doing and offered resources for the future. I did invite them to our listening sessions. I'm hoping that maybe in the future they'll be able to take part. But if you have a person in particular from the organization to reach out to, we're more than happy to get that information as well.
Yeah, and then I see that Catherine responded that she suspected that there was that was a policy established by the commissioners. Did you mean the the way the wages were assigned, or not sure. But yes, you're probably right. It probably was a policy established by the commissioners. Are there any further questions, or does anybody have any feelings about the name of the project? We are always into feedback about the name of the project. I want to reiterate what I think Tara said earlier, that everyone will get an email after this session ends. It will contain a link to the website, and currently the website's not publicly available, so it's password protected. So the email will contain the password as well. You can move around within the website, click through, take a look at things. The email will also contain our email addresses, mine and Natalie's and Tara's. And please feel free to email us individually, email us as a group with any feedback. Take these questions, these guiding questions with you. And if you have, as you're looking through the website, if you see something that you really want to point out to us, or if you have feelings about the name of the project or anything, please let us know.
Yeah, and we just want to thank you again for your time tonight. We appreciate you giving up your time and for your interest, and we look forward to sharing more with you all in the future.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you all. We appreciate it.
So we'll close it out then, and